Hello, everyone. Report you on the inevitable transformation, the Gemini Sagittarius nodal phase of the U.S. Pluto return. And this is where I live. I live in Huichun on unceded Ohlone lands, which is now called Oakland, California, on the west coast of the United States, San Francisco Bay Area. I am originally from the U.S. My family heritage comes from here, Black identity, and also from Jamaica. So I have blended American and Caribbean ancestry. I'm also a colonial historian, and all of that I share just to say that that all comes into my evolutionary astrology studying and analysis. So the most recent Cancer new moon eclipse was in my 11th and house, and Uranus just made its final pass to my midheavens. So in Taurus. So I am happy to be here talking to you on the interwebs about this topic. I wanted to talk about this because the Gemini Sagittarius, as you all know, the nodal shift just happened, but what we're seeing is like symbols and stories and a sense of belonging, and these things are how we create culture. And I just felt like it was important to capture that. So when we talk about the Pluto return, I know us astrologers, we've been seeing this coming. We're talking about the United States here, and here we are in 2020, and this is an image from the recent street art that was put up during recent protests. And I just feel like this image so much correlates to the Pluto return here in the United States. And this is a story of a young woman, Brianna Noble, who rode on horseback at a recent protest. And she definitely made the newspapers and the news media, but also kind of became iconic symbol in the movement here. If we have time, I'd love to come back and discuss some images that I see in this. But here's another one, another image I would say symbolic of the Pluto return of the United States. Here we see Indigenous people for Black lives. And I can't help but like try to see these images from my earlier self, like in 2018 or 2019, like talking about the Pluto return. If someone had shown me these images, I wonder how I would have made sense of it. The masks and just the content. But now in this moment, they just take on the surface. These things, of course, erupting and needing, like forcing us into transformation and healing. So Pluto can signify upheaval, death, rebirth cycle, transformation, power. It can be associated with pestilence and mass movements. And so then in the transits that we're seeing here in 2020, as if Pluto wasn't enough, but we have Pluto conjunct Jupiter and Pallas Athena, which is happening again. It happened just recently, but it will be happening again. And this is just providing major amplification of the energies that we are experiencing. Also, Pallas Athena is our warrior goddess, goddess of strategy. And so she's definitely been weaving through these themes. So we also additionally have Pluto square Eris, which happened June 14th and 15th. And this is a long cycle which will continue through 2021, but these are adding to the themes of justice, the dark feminine, that which has been hidden, and also the void from which we were all born. And as we also have Neptune in Pisces, adding fake news, disillusionment, illusion, media manipulation, and of course our retrograde season, which is Pluto, Saturn, Venus, Jupiter, and Pallas Athena. Now, as of the 18th of June, Mercury all stationing to retrograde. So,
Um,
yes.
that's okay. I was wondering whether your slides were moving, but they are, so it's
Well, I just wanted to talk about this having this imagery in the background instead
okay.
of just words. Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you.
So if we look at the Pluto cycle, 248 years, and if we divide that up into the typical 8 evolutionary phases, we would see that each phase is 31 years. And so that would mean that this nodal shift, this is the last time that the nodes of the moon are going to be in this configuration, the North Node in Gemini, South Node in Sagittarius. And the next time this comes around, we will be in the new phase of the Pluto cycle for the United States. And while I wanted to focus there, I wanted to talk about where we are coming out of. And so the nodes just recently were in along the Cancer Capricorn axis. We saw a lot of issues regarding um, the Mother Earth, Gaia, how we were extracting resources, basically our whole relationship to Mother Earth. This included ethnogenic plants. There were several campaigns to decriminalize plant medicines and to bring, and actually successes in bringing treatments like MDMA and psilocybin into treatments for post-traumatic stress disorder. So there was a lot of the themes really revolved around these things. So additionally, family separation at the border. We had issues regarding family, security, children. Um, and we also saw the emergence of the youth leaders and the climate activists. And if we have time, I'd love to speak more about that. So I wanted to highlight what's happening in the zeitgeist at these times and distill nuggets of wisdom and developing a strategy for moving forward. So I wanted to talk about where I am. Oakland, we have a multi-generational history of community struggle and protection against police brutality. This is the birthplace of the Black Panther Party, and a lot of social campaigns and programs that were that became implemented across the entire country were actually started here. And one of those is like the free breakfast for children. That's a particular Black Panther Party campaign that was born here, but then made it around the world. And so I'm going to continue to talk about these things like in relation to me, like Gemini. This is about the neighborhood and the life right around you. And this struggle is right around me in my life. So the Cancer Capricorn era, we were seeing campaigns. This is Moms for Housing. This is the story of 4 moms who took over a vacant home. It was a home that was actually kept off the speculative market. They call it speculative real estate, where a company will just hold a house off the market and waiting for the prime time when the maximum profit can be made. So here in this area, we have become the most desirable place to live in the world, potentially, definitely in the country. So we're seeing an influx of wealthy people moving in, which is fueling people being pushed out into the street, like literally. And then like a 1-story building will go down, and then an 18-story high-rise condominium will go up in its place. So very much like the space and neighborhoods around me have been the battle zone of this movement. So the moms took the house as a public campaign. They did it with media presence and intentionally. This strategy is not unheard of here in the Bay Area, but the fact that the moms did it so publicly, it was definitely groundbreaking. And so what you're seeing here in the pictures is the community. We formed a community around the house, and we were there day and night to protect the moms. And the narrative we had was that the community had decided that the moms could have the house. And so the moms had also gone to the company and had offered to purchase the house at the same price that the company bought it for, like relieving them of any profit loss. But the company had refused and, of course, threatened to use police force to get the moms out. So that's when the community responded. We saw just use of technology and cell phones and getting blasts to come to the house. And so we were practicing, like exercising our political community muscle, showing up in different constellations each time, each of us with a different role of how we were going to protect the house. So, and we made it through. If we have time, I'll go into the whole story. And then if you do want to follow it, check out the hashtag Moms for Housing, because you can see there's quite a bit of a story there. So it did come down to one day. This was actually the morning when the moms were supposed to be on national news on Democracy Now! And the Alameda Sheriff's Department showed up at 5:30 in the morning and with a military police tank and riot gear, militia gear cops. And these are civilian photos like that I took at the protests. So instead of having the moms speak about their issue on the news, what we got was just the story of them being in jail and the cops showing up like this. This media coverage was so disfavorable on our local mayor here that she actually had to step in, and she actually did claim credit for negotiating, purchasing the house between the moms and the company. But yeah, wasn't until campaign. So now I'm going to shift to talk about the nodal shift into Gemini Sagittarius. I'm speaking of the nodes of the moon. And I just wanted to emphasize again that it's important to still remember and hold that Cancer Capricorn, because the planetary nodes of Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn remain in Cancer Capricorn for generations to come and for previous generations. So when we're really talking about intergenerational trends and life on this planet, like holding all of humanity, ancestral healing, we're holding the planetary nodes, and that's definitely remained in Cancer Capricorn. So we're still seeing those issues. We just have kind of a new take, new influence on it. So I'd just like to introduce Gemini Sagittarius axis. So according to the EA glossary, Gemini Sagittarius relates to the transmigration of ideas. So Gemini is mutable air, and it's yang, and it rules the third house. Its ruler is Mercury, and it rules words, symbols, language, and how symbols make meaning of forms, how we identify, categorize, name, and classify. And this is a quote here. Gemini is curiosity, energy flowing out from the center of the inherent desire to know as much as possible and intellectually to understand the nature through the brain. So coming out of Cancer Capricorn, you know, we're all about security in our home, and now there's this curiosity, and we're seeing a huge importance around the thing, how things are named and how we make meaning of them. So Gemini also represents our opinions about the truth. Gemini is subjective and personable, and we take our overall view about what is true in our life for each of us, which is Sagittarius, and create names, classifications, and opinions about those truths. So its natural polarity is the 9th house Sagittarius, which is mutable fire, and it's ruled by Jupiter, represents the right brain, truth, and natural law. Sagittarius connects to the function of belief systems. One's belief systems determines how one interprets reality. Interpretations are not universally true or static. Your interpretation of reality correlates to your attitude towards living. And so here we are moving out of cardinal into mutable. And I feel like this is what we're seeing, a huge opportunity to actually allow for our perceptions to change collectively and as individually, each of us. So I do want to say at this point that like racism is a shadow side of the Sagittarius 9th house energy and one's belief systems. It can very much lead to stubbornness, like my ideas and my ideals are right, that my culture, my identity is the right one, or I need to convert others to my ideals. It can lead to not allowing another to express one's opinion, and in its extreme shadow, racial and ideological supremacy, and based on an inability to consider others and other realities. And so I'm going to keep going with my presentation here. So here we go. These are all eclipses in 2020. There's one from 2019. But so the first two eclipses on this chart occurred in Cancer Capricorn, and starting June 5th, there with the lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. For the rest of the year, all of the other eclipses will happen in the Gemini Sagittarius season. So these are some images around the longshoremen. So recently here, we've seen so many solidarity groups and movements across different alliances happening. And this one is when we shut down 29 ports across the West Coast. And here you see the longshoremen saying the loudest voice we have. So the longshoremen are the ones who load all the ships, all the goods onto the ship. These are all very Gemini and Sagittarius. These ports are trade unions, are Pluto, Uranus and Saturn. The longshoremen are Mercury and Gemini. The ports are ruled by the moon and Neptune. A strike, of course, would be correlated to Uranus. And solidarity I see is Venus here, unifying the people and building relationships. And of course, Pallas Athena, we're seeing direct lessons learned, right? And strategies. I'm speaking more importantly about the Hong Kong protests. We're learning from what we saw happening in Hong Kong. This is Angela Davis, who is an activist and a academic. And this is her at the port on June 19th, but the quote there is from June 10th. And here she's saying, even without a background in astrology, that this moment holds possibilities for change that we have never before experienced. And I just love this image. You see everyone in masks, a lot of community care on so many levels going through. And I also wanted to say that this protest movement is global. I've heard several people in astrology mention that it's a nationwide protest, but we saw protests in Germany, South Korea, Scotland, Canada, France, Spain, England, Brazil, Sweden, Kenya, Denmark, Senegal, Belgium, Japan, Hungary, Italy, Poland, Turkey, Australia, Switzerland, and Portugal. And they were all protests against police brutality. There's a great photo series published in The Atlantic from June 8th, and it's a worldwide protest movement in photos from around the world. I recommend checking it out. So what we're seeing in these times is that language matters. We're also seeing a co-opting of language by the fascist police state-controlled media. Oops, one second. We've seen organized deception and deceptive organizing. We've seen peaceful protesters labeled as rioters and looters in the media. We've even seen organized crime taking advantage of the protest movement. Here they were labeled as like issues associated with the protesters, but it took about 2 weeks for it all to be revealed that there actually were militarized organized crime actually going on, taking advantage of this moment. We also saw lots of police lies. The police here were writing that the protesters had explosive devices when in actuality they were candles. So the police were using language, writing it into these reports to then justify their brutal response. We also saw the government here try to label the populace as Antifa. in order to justify increased surveillance on the people. This all just happened in the last 30 days, I want to say. But I must admit, time is a trip in 2020. We also saw ballooning police budgets. Talk about things coming to the light. The amount of money that our municipalities spend on police budgets dwarfs some budgets of entire countries. So I wanted to look at some astrological charts, and I pulled out some stories from I guess I started with I kind of moved the order of my slides. So in 2020, I went back for out that they were free, that they had been freed. And so I went in to look, and I had assumed that the nodes would be on the Gemini Sagittarius axis. And to my surprise, I found they were not. They are on the Libra axis. What I did find, though, is that there was a Uranus-Sun conjunction at the midheaven. And then also the nodes were in the Libra, along the Libra Aries axis, North Node in Libra, South Node in Aries.
Della?
Yes.
Your sound got a bit distorted when you moved to this slide. Could you please repeat what you said at the beginning, what this chart is for?
Sure.
Thank you.
So I was inspired by Juneteenth 2020, and I wanted to go look at the original Juneteenth, and I wanted to see if there was any connections. I had assumed that I would find the nodal axis in Gemini Sagittarius. That's what sent me looking. But this is the original chart in Galveston, Texas, in June 19th, 1865, when the last slaves in the United States found out that they were in fact free. And it is now a holiday celebrated.
Great, thank you. Great.
So what I didn't find the nodes being where I thought they would be, but I did see a Uranus Sun conjunction right on the midheaven. And I do believe that Uranus definitely has a story to tell when we look at these racial histories in the United States. And I'm going to try to weave this all together and tie it together at the end. So then I looked into the Juneteenth story more, and then the day that the slaves were actually freed was actually about 2 years earlier, the Emancipation Proclamation. This was actually when President Lincoln signed the order into effect, and it took over 2 years for those slaves to find out. So here what we do see the nodes, North Node in Sagittarius, South Node in Gemini, and also Pallas Athena is right there, conjunct the North Node, and also Uranus on the South Node here. Uranus retrograde at 17 Gemini on the South Node. So I'm going to go ahead and see. Okay. So now this is back into 2020. This is a young woman, Kennedy Mitchum. She sent Merriam-Webster Dictionary an email on May 28th regarding the definition of racism. She found it was lacking, and she was actually was tired of people using this definition in debates because it had only really touched on racism that can occur in between individuals. It had left out systems of power and institutional racism. So she wrote a letter, an email, and they actually responded positively. So here's the chart when the actual definition of racism was updated. And you can see the nodes were just there, the last degree of the Cancer Capricorn axis. The nodes move retrograde, so this was right before they ingressed into Gemini. But what we do see out of bounds Mercury there is at 29 degrees Gemini, the critical degree of Gemini. And we're also seeing a Venus retrograde, a separating square from Neptune and applying square to Mars. And like I said, Mercury conjoining the North Node there in Cancer. So as of this date, the definition of racism has been updated. And I just thought that was just so interesting, because you might hear of a new word being added to a dictionary, but rarely do you hear of a definition being updated, and especially a term as taboo or challenging to speak about with racism. So here, I guess the stars were aligned perfectly. And here's Kennedy Mitchum, who has, through her personal story, she actually said people were posting the definition of racism on her social media when she would try to share her experiences. And so that's why she needed the definition updated. So this is the Juneteenth 2020 chart, but this was the day that the Associated Press made the announcement to capitalize the B in Black and I in Indigenous. This had been ongoing. This is something we've wanted for decades, but there'd always been pushback from the zeitgeist. But here this year we see that the terms will be capitalized when referring to people in a racial, ethnic, or cultural context. And so for those of you that don't know, the Associated Press writes the definitive writing style guide for the English language. So what they say really defines how all language should be written. So now moving forward, whenever you see reference to a Black individual or culture in the newspaper or in the media in any form, it should be capitalized and will be capitalized. So those are two language stories from the most recent media. I then, as I was preparing for this, so much happened, and my presentation kind of took a life of its own here. So I next wanted to introduce George Floyd, the life of George Floyd. This is his birth chart here. We have no birth time for him. He was born October 14th, 1973. He has a Venus-ruled Libra sun and Taurus moon. Natal Venus conjunct Neptune at 5 degrees Sagittarius, and that degree will become important. Natal Mars is at 5 degrees Taurus, which is also ruled by Venus, and it was close to transiting Uranus. So he had Uranus conjunct his sun at 21 Libra, and natal South Node was at 2 Cancer, conjoined Saturn at 4 degrees. And I highlighted these areas in his chart in the red circles. I wanted to talk about his murder, but I did not want to skip over his life either. So wanted to speak that into this presentation. Here you are seeing the inner chart is the George Floyd natal chart, and the outer chart is the chart of his murder. So like I said, he was in Minneapolis, Minnesota at 8:25 p.m. CDT. And these times the data was taken from Amir Baer, an astrologer, who investigated the exact time for this chart. So what you're seeing, like I said, transiting Uranus to his natal Mars, and transiting Jupiter was at the midpoint between transiting Saturn and Pluto. Both Mercury and Venus were out of bounds. This was the moment when Eris was square Pluto and Jupiter. So we have Pluto in Capricorn with Saturn as the ruler, both retrograde. Yeah. So I'm gonna keep, let me just see what happens next. Oh. So yeah, so we're also seeing Pallas Athena was conjunct Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius, and Mercury was in contact with both Vesta and Hygeia. And I just believe that that goes to show that the community health is what the words that or is tied up in this event, for the whole planet is tied up in this event. So the murder occurred just after his nodal opposition. You could see the North Node just transited his South Node and Saturn. And his ascendant was at, not his ascendant, but at the moment, the ascendant was at 2 degrees Sagittarius. Then the ruler of the chart is Jupiter, which is at 27 degrees Capricorn, which is exactly the degree of the Pluto for the United States radix. So we can definitely see that here. I've seen posters, and even his daughter said that that he changed the world, and we are seeing the impact that he had. Okay. All right. So this is the first time that the Black Lives Matter hashtag was used. And I want to put a disclaimer in here to say that I am in no way attempting to reduce the Black Lives Matter movement to a hashtag. I just wanted to look at something that was a definitive moment. And I'm not even saying that this defines the movement, nor does it define the organization that is Black Lives Matter today. And so I'm just really talking about this in a surface level way. And I wanted to talk about this is the first time that the hashtag was used. We're seeing a grand water trine, which I feel is super significant for what this means. We have Jupiter also on the midheaven. The location for this is Santa Clarita. That is the location of the Black Lives Matter organization. So the house placement should be correct. But Jupiter right there on the midheaven, and that there at 4 degrees Cancer is also a very significant degree. So the grand water trine was Jupiter in Cancer, Saturn in Scorpio, and Neptune in Pisces, all around 4 to 5 degrees of those water signs. So then I looked at the George Floyd murder against Black Lives Matter. And we also see an impact that his passing had on the movement. We see the transiting, I'm checking my notes, the transiting moon, the George Floyd murder moon transiting the Black Lives Matter Mercury exact in Cancer. At 15, and it's in the 10th house. So that's like the public house, like for the world to see. Okay, so this is the U.S. Sibley chart in the middle, in the inner chart, and the outer chart is the George Floyd murder chart. Now, let me make sure I stick to my notes. So we're seeing the transiting moon to the U.S. sun at 12 Cancer. Transiting Pluto is opposing the U.S. chart ruler, Mercury, representing a challenge to society, but also the media and how everything is being portrayed in the international response to this tragedy is strong. Mars, Pluto can often be seen as violence, and here Mars is squaring the sun on the murder chart, and the U.S. Sibley Uranus ascendant on the moon of the murder is in tight orb to the U.S.'s sun. The moon, being the 8th house ruler of the murder chart, can also indicate how the tranquility of the U.S.'s 2nd house is affected by this murder. Lastly, we're seeing moon square to the U.S. Saturn, just highlighting that this is a difficult situation. Moon. Yeah. I think I'm going to skip this one for now and potentially come back to those if we have time. So what we are discovering here, we're seeing just like a mini changing of symbols. We're seeing monuments that once held value in our society being torn down by the people. We're seeing lots of things like Gemini is of the people, it's in the streets. And like that's where a lot of action is happening now. We're seeing less importance on our government. Thank goodness. It matters less what they do. It seems like we're seeing the action happening at our local municipalities. We're seeing direct asks to defund the police. We've seen branding and logos reimagined after the racist roots were revealed. Some of them were Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's, that just happened in the last 30 days. Land O'Lakes was another company that is going to be changed, that did change their racist logo. That happened in May 2020. We're seeing new terms being defined and old terms being redefined. Terms like allyship and performative allyship really being teased out. What is the meaning? Words like accomplice and white fragility are also coming to the forefront. So I wanted to take this conversation around language and reframing and to bring that into evolutionary astrology. So within, so without, and kind of to bring the evolution of change and transformation directly into EA. So I wanted to introduce this word as the kyriarchy, and it's a new word, right? And it was first coined in 2001. Interestingly enough, the last time the nodes were in, the North Node was in Gemini, and the South Node was in Sagittarius. And it's actually based on the ideology of intersectionality, which was developed by Kimberly Crenshaw in her intersectional feminism. And that is from an earlier time, 1989. But this is what developed out of it in 2001. And the word is the kyriarchy, and it is defined as a neologism derived from the Greek words for lord or master, kyrios, and to rule or dominate, archane. And it's a word that seeks to redefine the analytical category of patriarchy in terms of multiplicative intersecting structures of domination. How Uranian is that? So, okay. So this is a way, is concerned with the social order that privileges and oppresses people based on race, gender, language, class, sexual orientation, disability, culture, and so on. That's what intersectionality brings to the table. A term like patriarchy, it kind of like gives us like a set defined, I guess I'll just speak for myself. When I hear the word patriarchy, I had this assumed knowing that I understood, and that I found that by incorporating this word kyriarchy into my consciousness, that I'm more aware that there can be oppressions that exist that don't actually impact me, and that because they don't impact me, I can still accept that they exist. So I'm going to continue reading here. It says, kyriarchy is the best theorized as a complex pyramidal system of intersecting multiplicative social structures and superordination and subordination of ruling and oppression. In other words, the kyriarchy is the social system that keeps all intersecting oppressions in place. And so here in evolutionary astrology, we do talk about the patriarchy, but I wanted to invite you all here at this Pluto return of the United States to kind of to take in this word, kyriarchy, and to start using this word. And I was going to say the woman's name. Oh, what's her name? I'll have to find it. Okay, Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza is the first one to bring this word. And here we go. So I wanted to talk about Uranus and Taurus, and this is kind of what I feel is kind of a blessing in all of this. I mean, Uranus is often associated with lightning, being sudden and unexpected, but I do feel, and of course trauma, and now that we have it in Taurus, it's just interesting to think about this lightning under the ground. I just feel like it's a time to create new regenerative practices and to step into intention of bringing in new forms, things that are real, tangible, into our practices. Just with the pandemic alone, we've seen the emergence of victory gardens. And that's why I put these pictures here, because I felt like it is important to the pandemic. But so this here, I love this image. Just try to take the many layers of this in, of a small girl looking at this tree stump that has been carved. So the land acknowledgement, when I started this talk, I gave a land acknowledgement, acknowledging the stewardship of the very land that I live on, my physical body on this physical land. When I give a land acknowledgement, it's a way, it's a practice that reconnects me to all life on this planet. And it's acknowledging how I came to be here in this space. So though that is one practice, I wanted to explain that to you as a Uranian and Taurus invitation. I want to encourage you to investigate the names of the peoples who lived on the land where you live, and to speak their name. And also to encourage you to adapt this kyriarchy, this new, it's new to me, this, perhaps you already knew about it, but I did not know about this word. But I've learned about it about 2 weeks ago, and just what it has done for me in my consciousness has just opened me up to accepting what we are really working on to change. Here's another, this is another thing I wanted to explain. Reparations. Now this is a buzzword of the times. So reparations is an initiative that seeks to address the harms caused by human rights violations. And reparations publicly affirm that the victims are right holders and entitled to redress. So reparations can take the form of compensating for the losses suffered, which helps overcome some of the consequences of abuse. And they can also be future oriented, providing rehabilitation and a better life for victims, and help to change the underlying cause of the abuse. So I wanted to speak this into to helping people understand, like, and I'm going to try to explain why I think this is connected to Uranus and Taurus. When we talk about like the racial history of the United States, those people with black skin were actually the currency in the financial system. So we were the money being traded. It's not like a metaphor. When they say like that we held value, that my body held value. I actually was the currency of exchange. And like what my body produced was a currency, right? So what happened was society has changed in some ways it's still the same. But people with Black identity here in the US, we never got to cash out our bodies. So things have changed, but we're still seeing the same oppressive systems like reforming. So now we have the prisons pipeline, right? School to prison pipeline. And it's just another way where the containing and collecting of Black bodies produces profit for the ruling class. So I just wanted to explain that in these times, as when you see or hear other people talking about reparations, and if you have an aversion to listen and to understand that we need to talk about regenerative practices. We need to talk about like the changes that we're going to make that are concrete, that actually lead us towards change. And so these are some images that I took, more of the murals that went up. The environment around me tells so many stories, right? I mean, this all happened, we had the pandemic first. We had our local businesses suffering and closed, and just financial hardship on all levels. We only saw like large corporations being bailed out. And so then on top of the trauma of the pandemic and of the race uprising, we see beauty coming from it. And we have a community, we've created a culture here around creating beauty. Somehow like this like nourishes us in this movement. So I just wanted to share this. You see, obviously, I hope you see the monarch butterfly, signs of transformation, and of course the hummingbird, which is again symbolic. But this in the middle here, no justice, no peace. And I have been an activist movement leader for my whole adult life. And I have said this chant 1,000 times since I was 18. And I had always read it the way in the middle, no justice, no peace. And just recently I saw a protester sign and it says what it says up at the top here, no justice, no peace. And I was just kind of blown away how like my whole perception of the movement shifted just by switching out these words, but the sound of the words is exactly the same. So when we say no justice, no peace, you know, all these times I chanted it, which one was I saying? So I just wanted to highlight that as like a personal story of reimagining and revisioning. Um, it's going to take our creative selves to revision a future, to move forward with curiosity. That's the Gemini. We need to be curious. We need to be able to explore, leave our personal truth, even if for a moment, and use that curiosity to fuel us forward. We need to move forward without the intention of not harming anyone, doing no harm to anyone. So here, this is a mural I took a picture of yesterday. The struggle continues. This is a re-envisioning of Breonna Taylor, a Black woman who was murdered by the cops in March. And her murderers have still not been arrested or brought to trial. But this is the artist in the corner there on the lower right-hand side. You see the artist. I captured the artist in action, painting this mural. And I just wanted to leave this here with these upcoming transits because we are still very much in the midst of it. We have Jupiter, Pluto, and Pallas will conjunct again June 30th. Venus stationing retrograde today. Mars is entering Aries on the 29th of June. And of course, the upcoming lunar eclipse on July 5th at 13 degrees Capricorn. So stay tuned. That's it. This is my contact information if anyone wanted to contact me. But I'm going to flip up to this and I will close there and see if anyone had any questions.
Yes, just a quick question. That logo in the bottom right-hand corner, where is that from?
That is my logo and I made that.
Oh, very
It says
nice.
decolonize astrology, and I could speak about that. I just use culturally diverse archetypes when I explore astrology. Yeah.
I'm just wondering why the ankle section of that chain is locked and not open.
Well, if it's potentially because it's so tiny, but if you look at the chain link part where it's actually connected to the world, that the chain link is broken.
Aha, lovely, beautiful.
So the shackle is there, but it's no longer connected. And then I actually chose a globe with Africa being presented first. You wouldn't believe how often the United States is presented as the center of the globe.
Right.
Do they do that in Australia too, or is that just here?
They usually put Australia at the center.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. I mean, there's no center, is there?
No, not at all.
No, no. Well, look, we have no questions from our Facebook audience. And do we have any questions or comments from our Zoom audience? No. Okay, well, Della, any final thoughts before we wind down?
Well, yeah, I did want to speak to this, like just within the astrological community, there has been some great things that have happened recently. So NORWAC 2020, there were 2 lectures. If there's anyone looking to address internal bias that they might have in their astrological practice, there was a great lecture by Baer Ryver that brought in intersectionality into astrology. And then there also was a lecture by Diana Rose Harper, using astrology as radical self-care. And I just wanted to mention those in case anyone is looking for more context on how to address these things in astrology.
Excellent. I'll add them to your video. What was the name of Diana Rose Harper's?
Astrology as radical self-care. And she looks at ways that the kyriarchy oppresses us within our minds.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's from NORWAC?
Yep, NORWAC 2020, and both lectures are available.
Excellent. All right. That's beautiful.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much. What an enlightening presentation. I loved all the charts and the correlations that you just shed light on there for us. And so thank you so much, Della, and we're looking forward to seeing you again.
Great.
And would everyone now please unmute and thank Della Luna.
Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Della.
They really think they're not going to open school?
Great work, Della.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it. All right.